From playing mind games before kickoff to delivering career-ending hits, a special group of players have kept opponents up at night with their terrorizing behavior. These are the 10 scariest players in NFL history. No other player had a more iconic way of instilling fear in the eyes of his opponents than Ray Lewis, and he did it before the game even started. His pre-game entrance was a declaration of war from a guy who said that every time he stepped on the field, he was Maximus from Gladiator. As Lewis would emerge from a smoky tunnel with fire blazing all around him before partaking in something that looked like a scene from his favorite movie, opposing teams shuddered.
When that whistle blow, we unleash hell today. When that whistle blow, we unleash hell.
Because they knew what was coming. 60 minutes of bone-crushing hits from number 52. Sports Science said the only reason he didn't break his opponent's bones on every hit is because the shoulder pads absorbed 50% of the force. Lewis was so powerful that he didn't even have to be locked on a player to lay them out. Having shared a division with him for many years, former Bengals wide receiver Chad Ochocinco decided that he had finally had enough of Lewis's reign of terror. While Lewis had his eyes on the ball, Ochocinco tried to get payback for countless brutal hits with a blindside shot on the linebacker. Yet despite paying no attention to Ochocinco, Lewis leveled him to the ground like it was nothing and left the wide receiver out gasping for air.
When Rudy's coming, I tried to blindside Ray. He ran me over.
Consider it a lesson to never test one of the most vicious to ever do it.
He wasn't looking and still ran through me. And unfortunately, the concussion set in. I tried to pretend like nothing happened.
Along with making every hit count, it wasn't just quality over quantity for Lewis. To this day, he is still the NFL's all-time leader in career solo and combined tackles with 1,568 and 259. Before the whistle blew, before helmets even clashed, the fear had already begun. Because when Ray Lewis stepped onto the field, it didn't feel like football anymore, it felt like war. Every entrance he made was a ritual. The tunnel filled with smoke, fire erupted on both sides, and from that chaos emerged a man who looked less like an athlete and more like a warrior walking out of a Roman arena. His arms flared, his eyes locked in, his chest pounding to a rhythm only he understood. The crowd didn't just cheer, they roared. And even before kickoff, Ray Lewis had already won the mental battle. Lewis once said, "Every time I step on the field, I'm Maximus from Gladiator." And that's exactly how he played, with total domination and no mercy. Teammates described him as possessed. He studied tape until sunrise, memorized offensive calls, and could predict plays before they happened. To face Ray Lewis wasn't just a physical challenge, it was psychological warfare. He made elite athletes second-guess themselves, hesitate for a split second, and that was all he needed. On Sundays, cornerbacks could feel his presence even when he wasn't blitzing. Receivers crossing the middle brace for impact before the ball ever touched their hands. Running backs avoided the gaps he guarded like they were traps set by a hunter, because that's what Lewis was, predator disguised as a man of faith. Off the field, he quoted scripture and talked about destiny. On the field, he unleashed fury like divine punishment. That contradiction, peace and chaos coexisting in one man, made him terrifying. His teammates saw him as their heart, his opponents saw him as a nightmare. And the fans, they saw him as something bigger than football, a symbol of passion, rage, and unbreakable will. When he retired, he didn't just leave stats behind, he left a legacy of fear. A new generation of linebackers tried to imitate his pregame ritual, his speeches, his stares, but nobody could replicate that feeling of dread that swept across the field when Ray Lewis began his dance of war. Because when the Gladiator of Baltimore entered the arena, the battle was already lost.
If Ray Lewis ruled through fear and fire, then Jack Tatum ruled through something colder, pure menace. He wasn't loud. He didn't dance. He didn't shout before games. He just stared through his face mask like a man looking at a target, not an opponent. They called him the Assassin. And, unlike most nicknames in football, this one wasn't exaggeration. It was earned, hit after hit, collision after collision, until even the toughest players whispered his name with a mix of respect and dread. Jack Tatum played safety like a predator. He didn't just want to stop you. He wanted to make sure you remembered him for the rest of your life. He once said, "My idea of a good hit is when the victim wakes up on the sideline, train whistles blowing in his head." That wasn't trash talk. That was philosophy. Tatum turned football into a test of survival. Wide receivers feared crossing the middle because that's where he lived, in the space between courage and disaster. He hit so hard that players started looking over their shoulders before running their routes. And then came August 12, 1978, a meaningless preseason game between the Raiders and the Patriots. A routine pass over the middle. A split second that would scar the game forever. Patriots wide receiver Darryl Stingley leapt to catch the ball. He never made it back down the same way. Tatum's shoulder struck him high, and in an instant, Stingley collapsed. Motionless. The stadium went silent. Teammates waved for help, but everyone already knew. Stingley was paralyzed from the chest down. The hit wasn't illegal at the time, but it was brutal enough to haunt generations. The nation mourned for Stingley and turned on Tatum. Fans called him a monster. Media called him heartless. And when the world expected an apology, Tatum didn't give one. He said, "I understand why Darryl is considered the victim, but I'll never understand why people look at me as the villain." Those words cemented his image. To some, he was a warrior who played by the rules of his era. To others, he was proof that the NFL had gone too far. But Tatum didn't change. A year later, he faced one of the strongest running backs the game had ever seen, Earl Campbell. The two collided at the goal line with a sound that echoed through the stadium. Campbell managed to score, but the hit left him shaken. Later, he admitted, "That's the only time I ever felt someone hit me that hard. A shock went down to my feet. It burned." Doctors would later tell Campbell that hit likely triggered spinal problems that haunted him for life. That was the paradox of Jack Tatum. His legacy was built on violence that bordered on art. He believed football was supposed to hurt, that fear was part of the game. He didn't hate the players he hit. He just didn't care if they got up. His teammates loved him because he set the tone. His opponents respected him because they had to. And the NFL quietly changed. In the years that followed, new rules were written, banning clothesline tackles, helmet-to-helmet hits, and late shots over the middle. The league didn't say it out loud, but every safety knew those rules existed because of men like Jack Tatum. He left behind a trail of broken bones, broken careers, and one haunting truth, that in a sport built on contact, there's a line between courage and cruelty, and the assassin walked it better than anyone else.
If Jack Tatum terrified opponents with brutality, Lawrence Taylor terrified the entire sport. He wasn't just a great player. He was a storm, the kind that didn't adapt to the game. It forced the game to adapt to him. Before Taylor, quarterbacks feared pressure. After Taylor, they feared survival. The year was 1981. The New York Giants drafted a linebacker out of North Carolina. Fast, angry, unpredictable. No one realized it yet, but the league had just welcomed a man who would rewrite the meaning of defense. From his very first snap, Taylor didn't play football, he attacked it. He exploded off the edge like a missile, his timing perfect, his instincts sharper than anyone else's. He didn't just tackle quarterbacks, he hunted them. Coaches tried to double-team him, triple-team him, even build entire blocking schemes around stopping him. None of it worked. By his second season, every offensive coordinator in the NFL had one recurring nightmare. How do we stop 56? Then came November 18th, 1985, Monday Night Football. The nation was watching. Giants versus Redskins. A trick play. A flea flicker was unfolding. Washington quarterback Joe Theismann took the handoff, flipped it, and looked downfield. And in the next instant, Taylor was there. He came flying off the edge, untouched, unseen, unstoppable. The collision that followed was one of the most gruesome moments in NFL history. Taylor's body folded Theismann's leg beneath him, a sharp, horrific crack echoing through live television. The crowd gasped. Players waved frantically for medical help. Theismann's career ended that night. His leg was shattered, both bones broken. Taylor didn't celebrate. He screamed for help. He knew it was bad. He'd made history, but not the kind anyone wanted to witness. That single play changed football forever. Teams realized they needed to protect the quarterback's blind side, and in doing so, the NFL created an entirely new premium position, the left tackle. Taylor didn't just end a career. He reshaped an era, but the hit wasn't the only reason he was feared. Taylor brought something else to the game: chaos with precision. He was a linebacker who moved like a safety, hit like a lineman, and thought like a predator. John Madden once said, "He changed the way defenses played, the way pass rushing is played, the way offenses block linebackers." That's not commentary. That's revolution. Over 13 seasons, Lawrence Taylor built a resume that even legends couldn't match. 10 Pro Bowls, 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards, 1 league MVP, one of only 2 defensive players in history to ever win it. His own defensive coordinator, Bill Belichick, called him the best defensive player I've ever coached by a good margin. And Belichick doesn't hand out compliments lightly. Taylor's secret wasn't just power. It was recklessness refined. He had what Belichick described as a total disregard for his body. He played like every down was his last, throwing himself into collisions that would have ended other men's careers. Pain didn't slow him. Fear didn't exist, and opponents knew it. Quarterbacks saw ghosts when they faced him. Linemen flinched before the snap. Even the best offensive minds of the 1980s admitted privately that there was no playbook for Lawrence Taylor. He wasn't just a player. He was a weapon, one that forced the NFL to change its rules, its strategies, and its entire mindset. By the time he retired, every coach in America knew one truth: there was football before Lawrence Taylor and football after him. He was more than a monster. He was evolution, wearing a Giants uniform, and the reason every quarterback today sleeps with one eye open.
If Lawrence Taylor was a storm, then Dick Butkus and Jack Lambert were earthquakes, the kind that shattered bones and spirits. They didn't just play football, they infected it with violence. Dick Butkus, the original monster. Long before pre-game hype videos and smoke-filled tunnels, Dick Butkus made men tremble with just a stare. He was Chicago's beast, a linebacker so feared that opponents called him a man playing with demons. When Butkus stepped on the field, he wasn't looking to tackle, he was looking to hurt. Legendary defensive end Deacon Jones once said,
"With an animal, and he was a well-conditioned animal, and every time he hit you, he tried to put you in the cemetery, not the hospital."
Butkus fed on anger. Before every game, he'd invent reasons to get mad. If someone on the other team was laughing, he said, I'd pretend he was laughing at me or at the Bears. I needed that rage. He'd hit running backs so hard that they'd pray just to stand up again.
The first time I ever played against him, my rookie year.
8 straight seasons, Butkus led his team in tackles. Every collision was personal. Every scream, primal. He was the heartbeat of Chicago's defense and the nightmare of everyone else's. Then came Jack Lambert, the face of the Steel Curtain, a linebacker who looked like he was carved from chaos itself. Toothless, wild-eyed, and snarling, Lambert didn't need to talk trash. His appearance did it for him. He once said, "We're the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're supposed to be the intimidators." And he lived that philosophy like a religion. When rookie John Elway played his first game against the Steelers, he remembered one thing above all. He had no teeth. He was slobbering all over himself. I thought, just get me out of here. Lambert thrived on that fear. He called himself Dracula in cleats. He believed intimidation was as powerful as any tackle, and he proved it every Sunday. During Super Bowl X, when Cowboys safety Cliff Harris mocked the Steelers kicker after a missed field goal, Lambert didn't hesitate. He charged Harris, grabbed him, and slammed him into the turf. When reporters asked why, he said simply, "When I see injustice, I do something about it." That was Lambert, loyal to his teammates, merciless to his enemies. With him leading the defense, the Steelers won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. He wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the biggest, but he had something no stat could measure: the soul of a man who didn't fear death, only defeat. Together, Butkus and Lambert defined what it meant to play linebacker: raw aggression, relentless energy, and zero mercy. They didn't just stop offenses, they rewired minds. And when quarterbacks looked over the middle and saw either number staring back at them, they learned the hard way that in football's deadliest zone, the middle, the madmen always win. Some players play by the rules. Others change them. And then there are those who force the NFL to rewrite the book entirely. That's what Dick Night Train Lane and James Harrison did. Men from 2 different eras bound by one thing: violence too real to ignore. Night Train Lane, the original outlaw. Before highlight reels, before viral clips, there was Night Train Lane, a man whose tackles were so savage, the league had to ban them. Lane wasn't supposed to be in the NFL. He'd played just one season of junior college football, served 4 years in the Army, and was working in a factory when he randomly stopped by the Los Angeles Rams office and asked for a tryout. No one expected much. By the end of his rookie season, he had 14 interceptions in 12 games, a record that still stands. But it wasn't his interceptions that terrified players. It was the way he hit. Lane didn't tackle like everyone else. He went for the neck. He'd grab a receiver by the head or face mask, twist violently, and sling them to the ground. Crowds called it the Night Train necktie. It was fast, brutal, and unforgettable. In 1961, he ripped down Rams running back John Arnott so violently that Arnott lay motionless on the field. The next year, the NFL created a new rule: no grabbing the face mask. Not long after, they banned high tackles around the head and neck, what became known as the clothesline tackle. Lane didn't do it out of malice. He did it because it worked. That's how you knew Night Train wasn't out to entertain. He was out to erase. By the time he retired, his legend was carved in fear. He wasn't just a great cornerback. He was the reason the league had to evolve. James Harrison, the modern menace. Fast forward half a century, and a new outlaw emerged. His name was James Harrison, and like Lane, he was never supposed to make it. Undrafted, cut 3 times, told he was too small, too slow. But Harrison didn't quit. He hardened. By the time he became a starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers, he was built like steel himself, 6 feet tall, 240 pounds of raw anger and impossible strength. And when he hit, people stayed hit. Harrison's philosophy was simple: I never tried to injure anyone. I just tried to hurt them so they couldn't finish the game. That's not malice. That's old school football reborn. In 2010, against the Cleveland Browns, Harrison knocked out 2 receivers in the same game, Josh Cribbs and Mohamed Massaquoi. Clean hits by old standards, illegal by new ones. The league fined him $75,000 for one of them, but the damage was already done. Quarterbacks started flinching at shadows. Receivers stopped crossing the middle. Harrison didn't back down. He said later, "If I'd known they were going to fine me that much, I'd have hit him even harder." His workout clips became legend: 675-pound hip thrusts, 1,800-pound sled pushes, benching cars for fun. He was the last of a dying breed, a player who didn't smile, didn't joke, didn't care about fines or fame, only cared about impact. Opponents described his hits as collisions with a machine. No expression, no hesitation, no mercy. And in a poetic way, Harrison and Lane were mirrors of each other. 2 men separated by generations, both too violent for their time, both too real for the league to handle. The NFL banned their styles, fined their tackles, and rewrote their rules, but never erased their names. Because in a sport built on aggression, you can't stop violence. You can only name the ones who mastered it.
Defenders are supposed to be the ones who hit hardest, but sometimes the scariest players were the ones carrying the ball. These weren't finesse runners or agile playmakers. These were forces of nature. Jim Brown, Reggie White, and Earl Campbell, 3 men who made entire defenses wish the game clock would run faster. Jim Brown, the god of power. Every era has its legend, but none carried the aura of Jim Brown. He wasn't just a running back. He was a declaration of dominance. Brown stood 6'2", 232 pounds of fury and control. He'd walk out before games without a word, warming up within sight of the defense, letting them stare, letting the fear build. And when the whistle blew, he confirmed every rumor. He didn't just run, he collided. He viewed football as the closest thing to war in a civilized society. His motto, when they tackle you, make sure they remember how much it hurts. He led the league in rushing 8 of his 9 seasons, a record no one's matched. He retired with 12,312 rushing yards, 106 touchdowns, and a terrifying 5.2 yards per carry. Even half a century later, no one has averaged more yards per game. Jim Brown didn't talk about fear. He made people feel it. Reggie White,
the minister of destruction. Then came Reggie White, a man who turned faith into fury. They called him the minister of defense, not just because he preached, but because he punished. White was 6'5", 300 pounds, yet moved like a man half his size. Former teammate Mike Quick said he could take a 320-pound lineman and toss him like nothing. And that wasn't exaggeration. White used a move that became iconic. He'd lift a blocker off the ground and throw him aside with one arm. To see it live was unreal, as if gravity itself paused for Reggie. Opponents feared his mix of strength and speed. He ended his career with 198 sacks, the most in history at the time. And what made him even scarier? His calm. He didn't rage, he didn't taunt, he prayed and then destroyed you. Former coach Herm Edwards said, "I'd never seen anyone that big move that fast. He made blockers look like they were on roller skates." Reggie White proved that intimidation didn't need anger. It needed certainty, the kind that came from a man who believed every hit was divine justice.